I want to talk for a minute about curriculum design and the guidelines that I use to make curriculum design a simpler or a smoother process. So first, let me start by defining what a curriculum design is or how I define it. So you have instructional design where you're talking about how I design individual courses, or even as like a short series of courses. Maybe there's a program that has a few modules in it. When I'm talking about curriculum design, I'm looking at that big overall picture. So instead of looking at the individual puzzle pieces, I'm looking at how do all those puzzle pieces, how do all those courses fit together into an overall puzzle in this analogy. So we're looking at things like technology, we're looking at sequence of learning, we're looking at things like who are the learner profiles, is it groups of audiences, things like that. So the design part of it is far more complex. One of the things that makes it difficult is that there's a lot of material, a lot of training that comes out of a curriculum design. And whether you have a team of people or whether you're one person, either way, you're going to end up with shifting of what that material looks like. You want it all to look the same, like it's part of the same family, but it's difficult to control how that happens. So if you have 4 instructional designers working on something, if they're each doing different slides, how do you make sure that they look the same? Yes, you can use templates, but in terms of the language and the tone and things like that, you want them to look the same and sound the same, so to speak. If you're one person, you can say, great, I'm going to do it the same way all the time. But as one person, it's probably going to take you a lot longer. And what you create in March of one year and what you create in October, things will have evolved. And so the March and the October versions of that 2 different courses aren't going to look the same anymore. So the solution I have found is to have design guidelines. And there's kind of 2 levels of design guidelines. There's the high level design guidelines, which look at kind of the philosophy behind how you want to create your curriculum and your learning. And that's maybe for another video post. What I'm talking about here is the really nitty gritty ones. And I like to think of them as guardrails. So if you're going down the highway, you have the guardrails there to help you kind of, stay on the highway and not kind of veer off by accident. So they're like guardrails, and they touch on things like, what's the brand? So what are the color palette? What's the font that we're using? Obviously, or usually that's an obvious starting point, but it can get into other things like templates, and then even language. So how do you know if it's self-study, if it's spelled with a hyphen or not? So really nitpicky like that. But if you can document those decisions in a design guideline document, have it available to yourself if it's you creating on an ongoing basis. I always work with somebody who does proofreading or QA work for me, and I give it to them so that as they review my material, they can check it against to see where I may be not consistent anymore. Or if you have a team of people, you can give it to them so they can each work off the same document and you can have consistency across different designers. So lots of things to consider with curriculum design, but ultimately I think the goal is that the material that falls out of your analysis up front needs to look like it's part of the same family. And a way of doing that is to come up with some design guidelines that you can follow. I hope that helps.